Just the other day, we got the latest Miraculous World special, Miraculous World Tokyo Stella Force, which was set to introduce us to the newest hero team, obviously stationed in Tokyo. Going into it, we knew that they'd be using a different art style for much of the special, that we'd meet the Japanese heroes who were going to be a take on the Super Sentai franchise, and that it would star Marinette and Kagami. I was massively hyped up for this, to tell you the truth. I think that it is time that the franchise starts to expand beyond just Paris, and they seem to have a really interesting idea that they were running with. I liked all the trailers, and then we came to the release day. Okay, so I'll start off with giving my more general thoughts, and then we can deep dive into the story. I like the concept more than the execution of what went on here. For me, the world specials have been the bright spot of the franchise ever since they were first released. Even when the writing of the mainline show was a bit dodgy, you could rely on the world specials to be a good time. The perfect example is when season 5 ended the way it did, and then the Paris special came out and it was fun and fresh and a cool concept. For me though, it currently seems like the opposite's true. The writing for season 6 across the board has been pretty excellent if you ask me, whilst this special, well, it wasn't bad, but it left a lot to be desired. I like the music and the animation, I like parts of the story, but then there were also parts of the story I didn't like as well. I mean, the reality is that for me, this is probably the worst special they've put out so far. Like I said though, we got to do more of a deep dive than that. Feels a bit odd, to be honest. I've been massively happy with how season 6 has been playing out, and then we come to this and it's just massively and aggressively mid. I haven't gone in search of other people's opinions since I watched it because I didn't want to be swayed or anything like that. So this is really just my unfiltered view. I guess we can first talk about the animation. I think for a lot of fans for the longest time, there's been requests for more of the anime-esque style from the old concept. I was also one of those people that wanted to see more of that sort of thing. I love me some anime. When I got my first look at everything, while some of the actual costumes I thought kind of looked silly in their design, I thought the animation itself was rather good. When I sat down to watch it, I did keep that energy, although I will say I think it looked better in the trailers. That said, it's pretty clear from the action this is not going to be on the caliber of a My Hero Academia or a Demon Slayer in terms of the quality and intensity of the battles, but at the same time, that's okay. For the vibe they're going for, which feels very Saturday morning cartoons, I do think it works. Then there's the characters. I will say that I did like Marinette and Kagami stuff together, and they were a lot of fun. They usually are. That being said, I can't help but feel that there really was a cat noir-shaped hole in proceedings. Somebody who can be a bit more lighthearted and banterous. And I'm not saying that they had to include him, but if he's not there, somebody else needs to step up. Maybe one of the new characters you're trying to spotlight, for instance. Instead, there was nobody, and you could really tell. It was just missing that special something, you get me? Then, speaking of the new characters, I don't know, I don't think they did anything very interesting with them. For starters, there are 13 of them? 13's already quite a lot to be introducing in this special, but that's okay. We'll probably just get a snapshot of their personality and see what their powers do in battle, whilst honing in on the 3 major characters, but then they didn't really do this at all. It very much felt like the Kagami show in wrapping up loose ends for her character, but the problem was that we didn't know she had those narrative loose ends to begin with. This was all new to us too, and so the special needs to take time to slow down and explain it all to us, which limits the amount of time they can dedicate elsewhere, and I think that impacted the quality of the writing for these new characters. Hardly any of them got any real screen time beyond a single line or hello, and to be honest, it was worse in the action sequences. Remember when they all turn up at that festival to see Kagami and then there's the attack by the kaiju? The vast majority of the team then go MIA until they have to power up into the robot. It just wasn't very compelling. Then there were the 2 characters being presented as the leads, for this story at the very least. There was Kazuno, whose entire arc is being depressed because a year ago Kagami, his friend who he'd known for a couple of weeks to months at best, tells him she doesn't like dancing with him and runs off. Yes, this is what makes him depressed for a whole year. Yikes. Then we have the supposed leaders of the Stella Force. There's his love interest and clear future main character, Miki. I really thought she was going to get so much more in this story. It felt like she was a generic hard-ass who knows that Kazuno's in love with her. She in turn is in love with him, but she won't say because he's got to earn it or some shit. Plus, he's clearly depressed and cut off from the rest of them, but she doesn't do shit about it despite loving this guy. And I'm supposed to find that compelling for some reason? She doesn't seem like a very likable lead protagonist to me, but then again, I absolutely hate the trope where people treat the person they secretly love like shit. Maybe that's just me though. Of the other 2 characters referenced in the preview blurb of the show Stella Force, we have Yulu, the girl in pink, who's there for much of the story, but doesn't feel like she had much personality. Then there's Mayotte, who's the girl in blue with the giant zipper, who's mainly there to be a bit of a francophile, francaboo, frenchaboo, weeaboo. Unless she is actually French, but who really knows? I think it's funnier if she's just like that taxi driver and they're both massive fans of France. I also really like Billy the himbo, but like I said, it was hard to connect seeing as he was such a small part. I think the real issue here is that for the leads, the story almost completely revolves around Ryuko, and so now she's gone from the story alongside Ladybug, you're left with these characters that are hard to care about. I think it would have been much smarter to hyper-focus on 1 or 2 of those leads who've only just found their magical bracelet that makes them into a superhero and start cooking from there. Maybe instead of being some weird retconned friend/love interest, Kazuno could have been a relative of Kagami who trust her with the secret that maybe he and Miki have these powers, hence why she goes over with Ladybug to help out. You can still include Mayotte and Yulu because they're clearly the characters they want as the secondary leads in the show, and then you can make a story that involves all of them and spotlights them, like how Lady Dragon was spotlighted in Shanghai, like how the New York heroes were spotlighted in the New York special, like how the alternate evil Ladybug and Cat Noir were spotlighted and kickstarted a huge desire for an alternate universe spin-off in the Paris special. Meanwhile, there's the London special that fully reinvented Lila's character in a huge way and made her into a genuine threat who could easily defeat Ladybug in the right circumstances, which upped the stakes of season 6. All of those specials were able to counterbalance those new characters with the old characters, and it was great, but it's not the same feeling here. Here it very much felt like they wanted to make a Kagami special that explores her backstory and figured that when in Rome, or when in Tokyo, they may as well include the spin-off team. However, now without Kagami and Marinette, I have little interest in this show, whereas in the wake of those other specials, or at least all of them except London, since that's pretty much an alternate finale for season 5, I was clamoring for spin-offs. Show me the New York team and more Miraculous heroes with that box. Show me Lady Dragon fighting gangsters in Shanghai. Give me Shadybug and Claw Noir fighting alongside Betterfly to defeat the Supreme. Give me any and all of that. However, coming out of the Tokyo special, despite knowing for a fact there's a 3-season show on the horizon, I couldn't give less of a shit about this team, and it's sad. I'll still watch the show because I want to see if it improves, but if I was a casual, there'd be very little chance of me tuning in, which is not what they want. With those general thoughts out of the way, at last we can talk about the special itself in more detail. Okay, so the special actually starts off very strong with a bit of shipper content. Kagami and Felix have met up in the sky, as we know that they do from season 6. Felix is understandably needy because they're long distance and he misses being able to see her all the time. That being said, is there any real reason why he can't visit a lot more, or even just move to Paris? I swear that there was a throwaway line somewhere that he'd already graduated from school since he's so smart. I mean, the dude is extremely rich. I'm sure it'd be a cakewalk to move to Paris. I actually feel really bad for him here. He's clearly lonely, and I suspect that much like the other Senti children, dude has minimal friends. The ones he does have probably live in Paris, and so it's just him, his mum, and Dusu. Meanwhile, Marinette is also feeling the effects of long-distance relationships because Adrien is currently in New York. I love how casually they play this off as well. I thought it was really clever to set it up in the first scene as a throwaway line to explain where he is and why he's not involved, before you have that awesome scene right at the end. Of course, we'll talk more about that when we get to that part. I just thought it was really fun and a clever way to do it. Sort of bookend the story with it. Anyway, Adrien's awesome in this brief scene, playing their song for her when she mentions their dance in New York, and then they're dancing in spirit. Hell yeah! Took us 5 seasons to get to this point, so enjoy it while it lasts in case some big changes happen when Adrien figures out the truth. Kagami comes in and spoils the moment, so Marinette quickly has to hang up with the excuse that she has to go and read her parents a bedtime story. We all know that Adrien's naive as hell and is going to believe a lot of things, for example, hiding a ring and mashed potato, that thing from Yaxi Gozen. We also know that Marinette is considered a massive and yet lovable weirdo by her friend group, and also by Adrien to an extent, as we saw in Sublimation. However, it did make me laugh that even for him, this is completely unbelievable. Kagami comes in and tells Marinette that Tokyo needs her, or rather, needs Ladybug. She shows her a news report on an attack on Tokyo by a giant monster, who was in turn defeated by the Stella Force, who are at this point an unknown superhero team. Immediately, I thought this was cool because you see the destruction. It seems that in the Tokyo storyline, since the Stella Force is going to have different powers, that not everything can be reversed, which to me, upped the stakes quite a lot. Obviously, I knew it wouldn't be the case here because Ladybug has that power, but going forward into the show. Apparently not though, but more on that later. Also, side note, but since we see the villain powers people into kaiju by force, does that mean Stella Force killed somebody here for good? Yikes. Whilst Marinette thinks that new heroes are going to be fine, Kagami forces the issue, which leads to a scene which I know I'm supposed to find funny, but also was just kind of weird. Instead of just walking downstairs to talk to her parents and ask if she can go to Tokyo, whilst giving them the information they'd need in regards to where she's staying and safety and all those things, she instead calls them, having already taken off in Kagami's private jet. They are obviously shocked, but then they just completely accept this? Man, I miss the days of good and yet responsible Tom and Sabine, where they were obviously kind and accepting parents, but also just parents. Like when they briefly brought down the hammer on Marinette for being late and missing classes and whatnot. Or that time that Tom stood up for Marinette when she was accused of stealing, but also reprimanded her for accusing others and making things even worse. I don't know, I just think they've been somewhat flanderized into these perfect parents who will accept anything and be kind and easygoing no matter what, in order to contrast heavily against the absolute bottom feeder parents many other characters in the story have. I just think there's a better way to do things, and this makes them feel less real and less interesting. We have a funny scene where Marinette realizes she hasn't brought any clothes besides her pajamas, and so Kagami offers her an exact replica of what she's wearing. Is this not her school uniform from her old school though? It'd be very weird for Marinette to wear this, wouldn't it? On top of that, why does Kagami still wear it? What did she used to wear before she went to school? Does she just toss all her other clothes in the garbage? Also, I gotta say, it's a fun little guilty pleasure of mine when animation makes a joke about how the characters always wear the same outfit by having the exact same outfit repeated in the wardrobe again and again and again. I think they did it with Adrien too at one point, and it never fails to make me laugh. Since it would be a bit weird to wear the exact same outfit, she decides to use a sewing machine that's on board to make herself a jacket to wear. Why is there a sewing machine and fabrics aboard this luxury jet? Why don't they just go to a shop when they arrive. A quick Google search says that there are quite literally clothing stores at the Tokyo airport, so what's going on? Instead, she decides to wear her pajamas with a jacket. Okay. Kagami then asks Marinette to listen to a discussion by the Tokyo team, with Tiki going inside Marinette's brain to help her understand and speak Japanese. I'll be honest, that's pretty gnarly. Imagine the Tiki POV where she's just floating in grey matter. Also, what the hell is up with voice memos in this show? Is this a normal way that people communicate these days? Do people seriously have group chats that are entirely you recording clips of your voice? I get it for chats between couples because it is kind of cute, but in the context of this whole group, it's very off to me. Just strange and bizarre. Across the group chat, we get some voice clips from the majority of the relevant heroes in the special, as well as the orange one, Nico, who doesn't really play a role beyond this. The issue seems to be that Kazuno's not on the same page as the other heroes. Apparently he's been thrown off by Kagami's comment to him this badly, but at the same time, it's also said that he prioritizes the safety of the public. You actually see this across the special multiple times. It feels like this difference in perspective and priority could have been a much better hook for the story than a friend who I have no romantic feelings for told me she doesn't like playing Dance Dance Revolution with me. It's really stupid and kind of feels forced to make Kagami a more central piece of the plot. I stand by the fact that she should have been related to him and he confided in her for advice, with her enlisting Marinette to help. We also see that her backstory was majorly retconned, with all these people being her former friends. Marinette tries to get her to open up to her but fails, and so realizes that this is less of a Ladybug mission and more of a Marinette mission. Here is where we see the transition in the animation style. And by the way, for the most part, this opening section was really good. I know I ranted a bit about Marinette's parents earlier, but I'm still having a lot of fun at this point. The animation looks okay, like I said, it's not wowing me, but I've seen much worse, and it's proportionately better looking than the old style of animation for the show was, so there's that. The story's intriguing so far, the Francophile taxi guy was fun, the little gag of Marinette forgetting to take off her slippers before she goes inside. It's all swell. We then get our first look at the villains, who are aliens who have seemingly crash-landed on Earth in a volcano and who sent out the kaiju. Now they're reviewing the footage to see where they went wrong and see what the hero's weaknesses could be. Where are they getting this footage, by the way? It's clearly not attached to the kaiju. Therefore, is there any reason they couldn't somehow just get their footage to follow these people and see them de-transform and start hunting them down in their human persona? Feels like a bit of a plot hole. Either way, this guy decides that the only thing for it is to create collateral damage to ensure that the heroes can be defeated. Back over to Kagami's grandma's place, we have a fun little scene where Marinette's pigging out on the spread that Granny's put out. Nothing better than people eating food in an anime. I don't know why, but it always just seems so satisfying. Well, except for the scene in Spirited Away with the parents. Gran tells them that she has a booth for the festival tomorrow and tells a story about two lovers who lived apart and could only rarely be together. Obviously, like Felix and Kagami. And the secret tunnel episode from The Last Airbender. Here, the grandma tells her that her friends and her old boyfriend are going to be there, but Kagami refutes that he was ever her boyfriend. Once again, we get a really ridiculous and funny sequence where after eating all the food, it's made Marinette fat, and thus she requests that Kagami roll her to the room, before we move back over to the villain, who targets the Francophilic taxi driver and turns him into a kaiju robot. After a few more fun little gags, like Marinette not understanding why Kagami wants to bathe with her and then meeting Shinobu, the grandma's partner, we get the bathing scene, which gives us exposition about Kagami's life and upbringing. She tells Marinette her life was very similar to Adrian's. Teachers were brought to her house and she only would leave when she was going to fencing competitions. Outside of that, it was a life of isolation. I'm guessing that the parents would do this consistently because they were worried about their kid being in danger in the wide world? Or does using the Peacock Miraculous to make a child just inexplicably turn you into a massive abusive asshole parent? I guess going so far as to find a magical jewel just so you can create a child instead of the more reasonable route such as, I don't know, adoption, IVF, or surrogacy probably tells you a lot about them to begin with. It's about more than just having a child. It's about passing on legacy and DNA, bloodlines and all that jazz. Also, my god, Kagami shooting the ring out of the air in the wager with her mum, that was some next level skill. That was awesome. It is here, about a quarter of the way through the episode, that you actually first meet the Stella Force crew, and even then it's in the form of a flashback. Not great to tell you the truth, but at least they let you in on some of the personality traits of the characters, I suppose. In what is actually one of the best action sequences in the entire special, Miki challenges Kagami to a race to the red button to see whose martial arts skills are better or something along those lines. Kickboxing versus fencing. I'll be honest, not sure why you would have this wipeout style obstacle course in the middle of a school gym. Feels like it's absurdly dangerous and would definitely leave you with a concussion. At the very least, should it not be supervised by an actual adult or teacher? Miki goes first and benefits from the magic of anime time, as she's able to compress the 16 or so seconds it took her on screen to reach the button into a mere 5.3 seconds, which is a school record. Kagami's up next, and before she goes, she demands that Miki be her friend for 2 weeks after she wins. It seems that Kagami is also impacted by the power of time compression, as she's able to turn the 3 seconds it took for her to toss her foil into the button into a mere half second. Also, for one, she damaged school property by impaling it with the sword, but 2, I thought fencing foils didn't have pointed tips. So either she's been carrying around a sharp and dangerous weapon this entire time and is practicing fencing with it, or she is so strong that she's able to impale a blunted weapon into a button with her pure strength. I choose to believe the latter because being ridiculously strong for no reason is just so fun and goofy, much as we see with Kazuno. Miki obviously doesn't like losing and feels Kagami used cheap tactics and gets up in her face. Kazuno goes to intervene but seemingly trips over himself and uses both their shoulders to try to steady his fall, with this somehow sending them both flying so hard that they fly through the air and crash land. He goes over to check on Kagami first, which leads to them becoming friends. Her first ever friend. They bond specifically over playing a dancing game at the arcade, and Kagami falls in love with him, but too bad because he's already in love with Miki. So poor old Kagami gets the full Zoe experience. Marinette asks if she's still in love with Kazuno, and Kagami rages at her since she isn't, but she also refuses to give the full answer about what's going on. By not doing so, it obviously serves to create tension and plot, but also dooms us to having this fairly weak plot point dominate the entire episode. Kagami sees a kaiju in the distance, and both our heroes suit up to go and help, whilst the Stella Force does the same. We also see that it's true that the team is not on the same page, and they are kind of shit. Yellow and Red do take down the kaiju briefly, but don't pay attention to any potential collateral damage, and almost let some random mother and daughter get crushed to death by a robotic arm that they cut off, so they're not working in sync. You might be thinking, oh, but Smarty Pants, that's the point. They learn to work together over the course of the special. But I would have to ask you, is that actually true? To me, it feels more that they help Kazuno get out of his funk and learn some very, very vague lessons from Ladybug, and then it's all good. I don't know, I just think it's some very weak storytelling in that regard. That being said, I did find it fun that they're all clearly different members of the Zodiac. Gotta find the bright spots where you can, I guess. Kazuno/Capricorn keeps trying to get them to take a breath and slow down because he can see some patterns appearing on the kaiju, but of course, nobody listened to him because reasons. Whilst Ladybug and Ryuko disagree about potentially getting involved, with Ladybug thinking they should just let the heroes do their thing, Capricorn ends up getting grabbed by the kaiju because he was too busy trying to think. He almost loses his bracelet thingy, which prompts Ryuko to jump in to save him. Leo, being an irrational asshole character, gets randomly angry that Ryuko's there. I don't even get this. Why would you be salty a hero turns up to help fight when you're an extreme rookie yourself? I know that characters with this personality type are a trope in anime, but I don't know. When they appear, I just think it's much better if they're treated if they're a joke and get intentionally set off by other characters, or everybody acknowledges they're a massive asshole. What I don't like is that these people somehow become popular and beloved with no consequences, or are being treated as really romantic to act this way. Capricorn then runs away when they all need to team up to fight together because he wants to help the civilians, but really it's because he has no confidence. By the way, these are the big two the episode focuses on. All the other Stella Force characters are window dressing. Leo and Capricorn are the main characters here, and I'm not feeling either of them right now. It's a massive shame. The other members of the team power up to create this giant laser cannon with which they intend to kill the robot, but Ladybug notices that his head resembles the taxi, which combined with her Eiffel Tower lucky charm indicates it's that nice driver she met when she first arrived. I will admit that this part where they fire the gun was really cool, and the contrast of them having this big celebration with Ladybug's horrified that they just obliterated this man was very funny. Ladybug swoops in to tell her they just killed a dude, and they question her as to how she could possibly know this. For some reason, she says, it's just my intuition. Why not explain what's going on? Why not say that you have a special luck-based power that gives you special items that can help out in certain ways, and you puzzled out the idea that this guy got turned into a monster? After all, the monsters have to come from somewhere, and in Paris the villains are generally civilians who have been powered up by a secret villain. Surely it makes the most sense to explain this to everybody so that they can at least get on board and be on the same page. It's not like they're in much of a time crunch or anything, right? You can't get much more dead than this guy is. Then again, I actually think it makes a lot of sense, and I kind of liked it. It shows a flaw in Ladybug's thinking. Because when you think about it, a lot of her plans with the Miraculous involve a hefty helping of, trust me bro. Except the Miraculous know her and trust her judgment and instincts, and so that works. Not so much here because they don't know her, hence the issues that arise. She Miraculous Ladybugs him back to life, and the Stella Force have to jump back into the fight, and Kazuno mentions that he can see the markings on the robot. Lucky Charm gets some spray paint and he marks them out, and Ladybug says that they need to target them. Here we get some character inconsistency. Leo, of course, is against Ladybug here, and that's fine because that's what her character's like at this stage. I think it was actually the blue one, Sagittarius, that I took issue with. This character is some sort of francophile who knows the Miraculous by sight and is very excited. Here she yells at Leo to listen to Ladybug because she always has good ideas, and yet just a second before that, she was shaking her head in anger at Ladybug bringing the kaiju back to life. I thought she always had good ideas, Sagittarius. It's just such a needless inconsistency in the writing of the character. Things wrap up, Leo seemingly starts to learn a lesson, and then they all go their separate ways. Kazuno heads home, and here was where we got the reveal that little bracelets they use to power up are actually able to talk. To be honest, maybe it's a little bit derivative to always have these little beings that give heroes powers no matter what they are, but at the same time, it's always so much fun, and I think it adds a little extra element to the story. Plus, they're really cute. Here we come to one of the best scenes in the whole special. See, that's the thing, right? And something I'm actually realizing. For the most part, part, the special is very good when you look at it as a Kagami special, Kagami's story, as Miraculous World Tokyo Ryuko. I think it just fails in its attempt to showcase this new team, and it doesn't make me want to see more of them. The Kagami stuff is top tier. Yeah, the retcon of her whole backstory and friendships was a strange choice at first, but it also makes sense, and I think it enhances her story. Then her interaction here with Marinette, where she's curled up crying and Marinette tries to get her to open up, is so beautiful. I mean, the actual flashback and the reason why Kazuno's in a funk and has been all this time is kind of stupid, but the way that Marinette cuddles her and comforts her is really awesome. Regardless, a really well written and emotional scene that makes you care about Kagami. Not so much Kazuno though, which I think was part of the point, but you can't win them all. We then go back to the villain. I think he's called the Modeler. He's mad that Ladybug and Ryuko swooped in to help the Stella Force, and here we get a bit more information about his goals. He wants all the pieces of the Stellar Matrix, and a being known as the Supreme is going to help him get them in exchange for the Modeler helping him escape. $1 million! Says the Supreme is going to betray this guy during the actual show, by the way. I do wonder whether this Supreme's meant to be the Supreme that was referenced during Miraculous Paris. I don't know, I kind of hope it's not, and it's just this universe's version, you know? I kind of feel that the OG Supreme is a villain for the Miraculous, and then also the AU Miraculous, rather than the Stella Force. It just feels like a better fit. He was introduced in the Paris special after all. Thus, I would really hope that for some reason they've just given two villains the exact same name. We'll have to wait and see though, but I did get a sinking feeling when he said he knew the heroes by name, and that he'd seen similar work before. Ah, damn it! The next morning, Marinette decides to steal Kagami's phone and sneakily uses her fingerprint to unlock it. She then sends a message into the group chat from Kagami, asking all her friends to meet her at the festival, and there's gonna be free food for everybody. Massively sneaky, and with a huge potential to go wrong, but hey, feels very in character for Marinette, doesn't it? Whilst the group panics that Kagami's been in the chat this whole time and knows their secret, Marinette goes downstairs to volunteer that she and Kagami can help Kagami's grandmother with the stall. Also, I think that's another thing that's a missed opportunity. There wasn't enough time spent with Grandma. This lady is Tomoe's mother, right? How do you go from that to that? What is the dynamic here? What is the relationship between Kagami and the grandma really like? They have one or two surface level conversations, but there just could have been more. It's not a huge deal breaker because honestly there are more important things here to explore, but maybe they can bring her into the main show at some point, just like for an episode like Marinette's great uncle. I think it could be some fun to explore and see her interact with Tomoe. Marinette goes to wake up Kagami, and I have to say, Marinette's French voice acting and personality, they're just a perfect fit for an anime style. It's crazy. They make their way to the market, and when they fully arrive, we get the moment where Kagami reunites with their old friend group. Over halfway through the episode, and Kazuno isn't even here yet. They have not interacted in the present. This is what I'm talking about, by the way. It just takes too long to get to the really important character interactions, and so they never get cooking with it. And so it becomes way harder to care about these new characters as opposed to just Kagami's story, you know? We have a brief couple of lines by each of the other Stella Force members, and they seem to be pretty interesting, particularly the really tall ones. We got the fashionista, the hungry guy, and the silent hugger. But like I said, there isn't enough time to explore them pretty much at all, and so this kind of falls flat, and you don't really get to see the bond. God damn, why do all my favorites have to be minor characters with no impact on the plot at all? It's such a shame. Marinette notices that Kazuno isn't there, and in completely unsubtle Marinette fashion, she tells them they should go and get him. Good God, she's so unserious and ridiculous. I love it. Her character's working so well in this context where it's just low stakes weirdness as opposed to her being genuinely insane like in Sublimation. Meanwhile, some random fishermen get caught by the villains and turned into monsters alongside their entire catch, which obviously sets up the big battle of the special. In the car over on the way to see Kazuno, Miki tells Marinette that she knows it was her that sent the message, seeing as Kagami would never speak like that, even over text. They then talk about how Miki's in love with Kazuno and Kazuno's in love with Miki. However, they aren't together because he's never dared to confess his feelings to her, and she thinks that victory must be earned, so she's not going to confess either. Oh, get excited! A good 3 seasons worth of slow burn romance where we already know they have feelings for one another but they won't confess. Kill me now! At least with Marinette and Adrian, they were in love with different personas, and that was part of the thing. The love square was famous. This is just stupid. It's contrived and lame. With 13 characters, you could easily have these two get together in the special and there'd still be endless opportunities for storytelling. It wasn't to be though, and that's a shame. That being said, it was funny when Marinette got to see them interact and had that moment of realization that this is what her friends used to witness from her. Here is where the episode felt like it really started cooking a bit. The big army of kaiju march into battle, whilst at the same time, the little fish and the crab ones attack the festival and start turning people into more of them. A true Miraculous classic. This next action sequence was at once awesome, but also disappointing as hell. You have Billy, Mayotte, and Yulu beating these things to a pulp. No powers, just fists, and it's awesome. Kagami steps in to protect her grandma and her grandma's partner, and it's really cool. But where are the others, you know? All those other characters that turned up to chill and hang out with Kagami, and who play a role later on when they build the robot. I know there wasn't enough time to really show off much of their personality, but a lot can be said for action sequences, and having a montage of all of them getting in a couple hits on the villains would be interesting. It would show how they fight, and in turn inform some of their personality to the audience. It's a shame because otherwise, this part is really good. It's just clear as all hell they didn't know what to do with a bunch of the characters, and so they just have them disappear. For me, that is pretty weak writing. I mean, in Sleeping Siren, they clearly had specific characters they wanted to focus in on, but managed to have pretty much the entire team get their brief hero moment at the same time. They can do it, they just chose not to. Things are getting bad here and they're getting cornered, and in order to protect her grandma and friends, none of whom have transformed yet, she turns into Ryuko and blows all the enemies away with her Wind Dragon power. Okay, so suddenly it seems that Kagami is the person that has the most people know her secret identity. There's her whole old friendship group, Lila, her mum, her grandma and her grandma's partner, Marinette, Felix, Adrian, Gabe knew. Pretty sure Chloe would know from Miracle Queen if she cared enough to remember. I'm not sure who else beyond that, but that's already a lot of people, isn't it? Good golly. She really does give minimal shits about the whole secret superhero thing. Back at Kazuno's place, he and Miki transform and leave to go and fight, leaving Marinette on her own at the apartment, which gives her time to transform too. Also, I've noticed that the quality of the animation can vary very wildly in this special. Sometimes it looks pretty damn good, but sometimes, especially at a distance, it looks really shabby. Just one of those things, I guess. Anyway, she lucky charms herself a motorbike and a helmet, which I will say was pretty awesome, although that bug face freaks me out. Was not keen on that helmet. Seriously, I have nightmares about giant bugs where you see their creepy faces zoomed in. Yuck. Also, wearing the helmet instantly makes her look like a villain to me too. Like some Z-lister villain that might battle Spider-Man, you know? Returning to the battle, all of the Stella Force are suddenly there, and they're transformed, and they get some combat moments at last, but it's in still image group shots during a montage, so it's not really all that great. Somehow, despite all the punching and kicking going on, nobody's directly got them in the chest where the glowing symbol is, and once Kazuno mentions it, then they manage to beat up the army and turn them all back. Also, after that montage is complete, suddenly, only the main Stella Force characters are anywhere in sight. What's going on with that? Where'd the others go? Ryuko jumps in again and intervenes, with Sagittarius telling Capricorn who she is, and then Ladybug turns up on her bike. This is actually where we got a fun little moment of logic. I see so often in anime that in the heat of battle, somehow characters are able to stop and monologue or have intense stare downs with no consequences. Here though, they subvert the trope by having the three of them get smacked by a tentacle and sent flying, which gave me a good giggle. This in turn has further consequences, as Miki's distracted because she's worried about Kazuno, which lets her get crushed by a pillar and then instantly turned into a fish person by one of the villains and abducted. Once again though, the plot point only really makes sense because apparently the whole team is just gone without a trace. Kazuno got launched, yeah, but now apparently only Mayot and Yulu were there to see Miki get snatched. I know I keep coming back to this again and again, it's just a big weakness in the writing. Where's everybody else gone? If they dispersed over Tokyo to protect the people, then tell me that. Show me that. Kazuno hears over the team comms that Miki's been snatched, and he has a breakdown until Kagami turns up and shows him the letter she wrote to explain everything to him about her feelings, etc., whilst Ladybug pulls off some extreme bullshit. She uses Miraculous Ladybug to turn everybody back from being fish people, including Miki, which means she's saved just in time from having her Stellar Matrix stolen. Oh, it's such bullshit. I mean, if she can do this because they are victims, why can't she just instantly do this whenever there's mind control or whatnot in the main show straight away? Hell, wouldn't she have been able to do this to stop Gabe's army of drones during the season 5 finale as well? Obvious lead character Miki gets a very brief showdown with the modeler, but it just wasn't enough. Hell, I think a well-written and exciting villain is a key part of any show. I don't think they built this guy enough to pique my interest in that way. He probably should have been more involved in the story, but it is what it is. So Kazuno gets his groove back, and it's actually a really great moment. The only problem, of course, being that this emotional scene is between him and a character who is likely never going to appear in the show beyond maybe a season finale cameo, you know? Maybe they'll have them dancing online sometimes too or reference that, but she won't feature heavily at all. So yeah, it's a nice moment in isolation, but it sets nothing else up for the future, and so to me, it was a bit short-sighted to have this be the big emotional climax of the episode. Back to Ladybug, she's still spamming her powers, turning everybody back into humans and fish presumably, but now she's running on fumes, and there are still the big boys to deal with. Okay, so the Stella Force all then team up to turn into the big mech, and in some more absolute bullshit, Ladybug casually shows that her power alone equals all of theirs combined. She just needs a little jumpstart from Kagami's Storm Dragon. How would you feel being Stella Force? There's 13 of you, and this French hero turns up and is better than you in every single way, carries your ass through the battle, pretty much single-handedly stops your team from crashing and burning, and is able to be as strong as all of you combined. Gotta be a blow to the ego. Oof. Also, surely this is a hint they're making Marinette's power level a bit ridiculous at this point. In a battle that takes about a minute, they defeat the kaiju, and then apparently now the Stella Force can also reverse all the damage with their combined powers. Lame. I thought it was really cool to have a team that would have actual stakes and consequences to villains running wild, but I suppose that's not the direction they want to go. It ends up feeling very forced and derivative. Not a fan of that. The villain gets a very typical shake your fist, I'll get you next time time type of ending before we finish off in Tokyo. Marinette bonds with the Stella Force and Miki totally knows she's Ladybug. Honestly, legitimately every single member of them should know that she's Ladybug, given that Ladybug openly mentioned that she was with Ryuko when they first met. She openly said, oh sorry, Ryuko's jet lag, and Marinette had been with Kagami this whole time. Hell, honestly, I think that when this makes the news, Marinette's parents and then Tomoe should easily be able to work this out. Come on now, it's not rocket science. Maybe this is how Lila started suspecting Marinette in season 6. Kagami and Kazuno talk, and Kazuno talks about Miki's backstory and why she's so rude, but I think it would have made more sense to have the special focus on that side of things, right? Explain why she is the way she is, not in some throwaway dialogue at the end. I keep harping on about it, but the Stella Force crew got nothing out of this special other than an introduction and a pretty generic villain. It felt more like a Kagami flesh-out special in that respect, and it worked very well and was very good. We got backstory and explanation as to why she is the way she is. We see how she began to become more and more lovey-dovey with Felix, how her new design came about, got great moments for her and Marinette, but yet Stella Force were left in the dust. Hell, even in the two big battles, Miraculous heroes were the real MVP. I know it's a world special, but if it's being made as an intro to the actual show, not as a fun side adventure like the others were, then it failed in its task. Plus, I just feel like it was missing a little something extra. Cat Noir, the Stella Force personalities were not enough to make up for this absence. They could have been if they were written better and given more screen time, but they just weren't. So hopefully going forward when the show releases, they're able to come out of the gate hot, because otherwise I do not see it doing well or being very popular. The time to establish the new stars was now when you had the most interest, and they just didn't. 20-minute episodes have done more for individual Miraculous whilst also pushing forward Marinette and Adrian's stories during season 6 than this did for Stella Force in close to an hour. I enjoyed the special overall, don't get me wrong. I liked what we saw of the characters, it wasn't enough. Sorry. We finish off with a cute little scene at the end where Marinette sends a voice note to Adrian saying she loves him, and then Kagami does the same, heralding a shift in her relationship to be more affectionate by the time we see her in Yaxi Gozen. I will say that I like how they tie the specials more heavily into the shows these days. You don't need them, they're just excellent supplementary content. The best moment of the whole thing though comes at the end. It blew my mind. Turns out when he was in New York, Adrian had been dragged into what seems to be a world-ending threat, fighting alongside the New York heroes. Holy shit. What the hell? I don't think anybody saw this coming, right? Okay, so that surely means they're going to make a world special following this story, right? Right? Maybe that'll serve as some sort of intro into a show following the New York heroes with that Miraculous box. Oh, that would be so much fun. I will say that I do think that Adrian has been treated better by the narrative in season 6, which has copped me a lot of flack in the comments. I will say this though, if they do not make this into a special or whatever, then it's actual bullshit and I will buy back into that original narrative. I promise you. Holy hell, what a great way to end things, because it leaves you feeling pretty excited about Miraculous. Not about Stella Force, but the main show and the future specials? Hell yeah! With all that being said though, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of Miraculous Tokyo? Did you like it as a standalone special like I did, but dislike it as a sort of pilot for the new show? Maybe you have a completely different opinion to me. Maybe you think it was a great showcase of the new heroes, villains, and storyline. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.